Hello, and welcome to the Catching the Octopus podcast. Here, we will explore how connecting inward gives us an advantage outward. We openly talk about the obstacles and challenges and difficulties that life throws our way and how they become moments of gratitude and things that can benefit us when we look back on our lives. I'm your host, Niomi Hurley, and it is my mission to bring you top quality guests that will share with you openly their obstacles and also the techniques they use to go inward that strengthens the way that they serve themselves and others at the highest level. Thank you for joining. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to Catching the Octopus podcast. Today we've got a recap episode, and today we're recapping Duncan Bhaskaran Brown, the interview that I had with him. Now, Duncan is the CEO of Alkaware, and he spends his time helping people push overindulgence out of their lives. And it was a great conversation with Duncan. Definitely go back and listen to it. But we talked a fair bit about alcohol and how it can impact business. And so how we as leaders might be able to step up and assist in this space. Or if you've identified a problem in your business, someone like Duncan might be able to come in and create some change around that and help those people out, because it's not just the health issues we have to be concerned about for them personally, but it's also that ripple effect that comes out. It's how are their family relationships going or other personal relationships? You know, if they're not in a state where they're actually active within their family and doing great things out of work, then that can create issues on their mental health, which affects cognition and decision making and productivity. If they're turning up to work after a big night or after consistently drinking every night, then they can be sluggish and not as clear in the mind, be a bit cloudier. So that again can affect the productivity and the cognition. And it's tricky because our Western culture has a really heavy focus on alcohol and it being a social connector. And so when we're younger, more so, we tend to be in these social environments where we may be drinking, within that social context, but then it becomes something that is more of a habit that we just do. And, sometimes people might do it to wind down and, after a stressful day, and then that turns into now every day, right, that they need to have a drink because they don't have the tools to be able to manage that stress in other ways. So most people that go to Duncan or most people that look for help with their drinking aren't always overly heavy drinkers either. They just realize that it's no longer serving them. Now, me, myself, I was quite a heavy drinker coming through, and not so much probably until, in my about 17, 18-ish, I was usually the one driving everyone around. And I was skippering. So I wasn't really drinking too much then, but probably late teens, early 20s, I did start on my drinking journey. And have many moments that I probably would like to forget or have forgotten, right, because of that space. Then as I got older, I continued drinking well up until probably around, I think it was around 35. I fell pregnant with my daughter, and I stopped drinking for a little while with my son, but I was a lot younger. So after I had him, I went back to drinking. And then with my daughter, after I had her, I had a night out, and the hangover the next day was terrible. And for me, that was the moment where I was like, oh, I don't think I want to be a drinker anymore. And so I stopped drinking, and now minimally drink, maybe socially from time to time, but I'm not. I would probably call myself almost a non-drinker from how rarely I do have a drink. Or if I have go out and do drink, it's one drink and that's it, in those social settings. So, we tend to think that alcohol is something that we can control until we can't. And we also tend to think that because we live in a society where alcohol's all around us, right? We think it's universal, but statistics actually show that it's not. And there are parts of the world where no one drinks or majority of the population doesn't drink. There's even some people within the world that are genetically not aligned to drinking. And so that can flush their face, increase their heart rate. It can also create a whole range of different health effects for them or mental effects, mental health effects as well as physical health. Um, within Australia, there's different cultural groups that are drinking that aren't aligned with drinking. So if you take our Aboriginal population for starters, Westerners brought in alcohol, right? They didn't have a drinking culture before that. And then once they brought in alcohol, it created a whole range of other social problems as well within those groups. It's not just limited to that culture. I know people within Western cultures as well and Western backgrounds that have really big problems with alcohol that are causing issues culturally and generationally as well within their families. So a lot of people, do stop drinking at some point or they realize that it no longer serves them, right? It doesn't take up the same space or the same place for them. And, they can stop drinking in regards to having a family, like myself, having a child, or some people have major health conditions that make them sit up and go, hey, this is no longer serving me. Now, when we are drinking, or for the drinkers out there, one of my mantras used to be, I feel sorry for people who don't drink because when they wake up in the morning, that's the best they're going to feel all day. And I used to think it was funny. And there was a part of me that really believed it, right? Until I didn't drink. And I realized that when I wake up in the morning now, I feel better than I did on any of my best days post drinking. And so that mantra is a little bit self-serving, right? It's not really a lot of accuracy in that. And we wake up sluggish, cloudy, tired after a night of drinking, and that affects our productivity and our cognition and our decision-making skills. So, we can test as industry for people that turn up drunk or under the influence of alcohol, but we can't test for if they're turning up with a hangover, right? And we already recognize that we don't want them operating machinery and working in high risk environments when they're under the influence of alcohol. But what about when they're under the influence of alcohol, right? What about when they're not clearly thinking, when they aren't making great decisions, when they aren't being productive because they don't have as much energy or they've got illness in their body, right? So it's something that does affect a lot of businesses. And there was some self-reported statistics, so they may be underestimated, but the people that have self-reportedly said they're about 35% less efficient when they've been drinking the night before. 35%. That is absolutely huge. And, Duncan shared a statistic with us that 500,000 people turn up every day in Britain with a hangover. Now, if 500,000 people are turning up to work every day at 35% less efficiency, that's a huge cost to business, right? And that's a huge impact on teams. And especially when teams rely on each other or teams see someone that's not being as productive as everyone else and they're getting away with it, right? And sometimes we feel sorry for people with a hangover. I know I did, and I used to want people to feel sorry for me too, right? We're like, oh, poor things, they've got a hangover. But no, we shouldn't feel sorry for them. That was something that they actually did to themselves. And we should still have the ability to hold them to the same accountability as someone who doesn't drink. So drinking can be really problematic in that space. And there are people that have drunk themselves out of a job or out of a home or out of relationships or just torn up their own family and their own relationships in that space and might have family that still stand by them, right? And relationships but still stand by them, but no one's happy in that space. And that ripples out. It also creates a lot of physical problems in the body. It can create, we think when we are having a drink for, oh, I need to just reduce the stress of the day, or this is my relaxation and my calm space. We don't realize that alcohol in the body creates anxiousness. and sleep issues. And if you go back to my episode with Dr. Nick Mabbott, you'll realize you can see how important sleep is, right? Again, for cognition and decision-making skills. It can impair organ functionality, and it also increases cortisol, right? So 2 drinks will raise the cortisol by 18%. And most people say it doesn't affect them, right? Oh, yeah. You may even be listening to this yourself and going, oh, you're banging on gnomes, but I'm not part of those statistics. It doesn't affect me. But that's because we don't realize the stuff that happens to us gradually, right? If I was a size 8 one day and over 10 years I became a size 12, I wouldn't realize the impacts. But if I woke up as an 8 one day and then woke up as a size 12 the next day, I would notice the differences in how my body behaves, how it feels, and the limitations that I have from the excess weight, right? How that's affected me. The same is with the alcohol. We don't realize if we drink every day, or even most days, we don't actually realize what it's like to have a body that's free of alcohol, right? That isn't under the influence of those effects from alcohol. And so the baseline of what we think is normal for us, it shifts slowly over time. Another good example is, if we're 18 yesterday or years ago, and then we wake up and we're 30 and our body feels in this particular way, we don't notice it over time. But if yesterday I was 18 and today I woke up 30, I would notice that my body has different sensations. My muscles aren't as limber. I'm not as physically fit or able to do some of the things, maybe even strength, as I did when I was 18.
If you're enjoying this podcast and you want Niomi or any of her guests featured on your podcast or as a keynote speaker at your next event, you'll find their contact details included in the show notes. If you'd like to learn more about how you can work with Niomi individually or as part of your strategy to improve leadership in your business, then review the courses, offers and services at getupandgoconsulting.com.au.
So these are the things that we can think about when we're looking at our teams as well. We have a social responsibility or an ethical, morals responsibility, whatever you like to look at it as leaders. It's part of our role to be able to create greatness for the people around us. Now, yes, we're doing that to improve productivity and profitability in our business, 100%, but we also have a responsibility to the people themselves. And them being the best version of them then flows out to their family and the broader community, right? And that broader community can be the community within your workplace. So this whole drinking thing can not only impact the productivity and decision making within business, but it can stop people from enjoying life. There's 40% of Australians binge drink regularly. That's almost half of all of Australians. And harm comes to you after you've been drinking. It's called intoxicated for a reason. The word toxic is in there. It's actually a poison. And what we're doing is we're poisoning our body, which is creating all of these great effects that we have when we're drinking alcohol. So education is key. And as we're learning, as we're growing and evolving as humans, leaders, and business owners, educating our people in the workplace is a really effective way of creating change that can affect social, cultural, and workplace environmental factors that then create greatness, right? If someone's feeling really good about themselves, naturally we know they're going to be more productive, they're going to make better decisions, and they're going to have stronger relationships within the business. So it's helpful to do education through the workplace. And as I mentioned, doesn't only help them personally, it also helps improve the bottom line. And there's people like Duncan around that are able to support and assist with that in creating some of that education awareness. It also helps people with their health. I've mentioned a few things before, but, one of the other issues that can come up is in the long term. So one of our human traits is we think of the now. right? We don't tend to think about, oh, what will happen to us 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the track. We're right now. I feel good now. How could anything bad happen to me down the track? But, there's a lot of dementia that is vascular, right? Which is around the circulatory system. And drinking doesn't help the circulatory system. But they don't realize that alcohol, it's not just, diet and things like that. Alcohol is also really correlated with heart disease, dementia, and even erectile dysfunction. And so we don't always think about the future for what holds. And so this is where education can be really helpful in trying to get us to a point where we're like, you know what, I actually, down the line want to be able to look after myself. I don't know if you've heard me say this before, but I do strength training. I like to keep my body strong. And my dad once, said to me, well, I don't know why you do that. I don't know why you feel like you have to do that. Do you want to live to 90 so you can have someone wipe your butt? Right. And I kind of looked and went, no, I want to know that if I live to 90, I'm going to be able to wipe my own butt. And that's the thing, right? It may not actually change our life expectancy, but it will change our quality of life when we're at that end space. And, I think all of us want to have the best quality of life that we can for as long as we can. There's one of the biggest things now. I've done the whole big introduction on that was surprising to me from Duncan is he said that business executives, right, are the group that the World Health Organization recommends get screened annually for health concerns surrounding alcohol use because they have the financial means to be able to support a habit. They have the job where they can say, oh, the pressure is getting too much. There's networking events. There's very rarely have I been to a networking event that doesn't supply alcohol. Right. So it's very embedded into that culture. There's other occupations as well that are correlated to increased alcohol use due to being away from support networks. And we've even seen with a lot of these mine sites that some of them are dry or some of them only allow 2 drinks, right, of the evening. And that's to try and minimize the health issues that come from that and also increase the productivity the next day. Even no drinks would obviously be better, and they're the ones that do the full dry site to have people to show up at work in the best way possible. So there's what he said as well, if I go back to that comment about the executives, is there's a straight line graph of correlation between earnings and drinking. And so, money doesn't take our problems away. With money comes a whole range of different problems or different levels of problems. So someone that doesn't have money can often think and go, oh, these people that have money, they've got nothing to complain about. They're still humans. They still have life that throws things their way. And so that can sometimes be an impact as well. So Duncan also spoke about, going to the doctor. When we go there, they treat the symptom, not the problem. And so if you have angina, for instance, they'll treat the angina, but they'll rarely investigate to see what the lifestyle habits that you have are impacting in that, which can be drinking, right? There's so many elements that it can affect from a health space, which then comes into the workplace. And this is why as leaders, it's important for us to step up and do what we can. So there was so many other things that we talked about, most drinking as a way to manage stress, but there's more effective ways to manage stress that can actually be more beneficial to you in a health perspective and more beneficial for the stress reduction as well. There's other things that we can do to be able to create that space. I know of a friend of mine who had a mum that was very heavily dependent on alcohol. And she often tells me that, after a certain point in the afternoon, she wasn't able to go out. So very rarely could she go out at nighttime to go and see her friends and do things because her mum had already been drinking. And, she missed out on a lot of things. And we tend to forget that sometimes as adults, that what we do impacts those people around us. And although our kids are really resilient, this stuff is remembered. And one day we can't turn back the time, right? We can do it now, though. We can change. Just looking through some notes, what else did we talk about? We talked about so many great things. We also talked about, that element of sobriety. And for some people, that's the right thing to do. Others is just finding the right balance, right? That's the right thing to do. So, we're not banging on saying everyone you shouldn't ever drink, but what we were doing in the interview was talking about how it can impact, so people can make an informed decision on how much they drink and what they put into the body. Some people are not aligned with drinking and need to stop fully. Some people, like myself, can still have a drink from time to time in different settings. Some people have their own way of looking at that as a balance, and that's individual for everyone. But as leaders, if we can see that we can help people within our team, then I feel like it's our responsibility to jump up and do that, right? And it then stops a whole range of other potential issues. So, for example, I'm a bit of an achiever type, right? And when I see other people around me that aren't pulling their weight and aren't actually contributing in the way that they should, it can become really frustrating for me when I was in the workplace environment, to the point where there was even some positions that I left because it just became too much for me to process and handle. For me, being fair and just and honest and in honesty and integrity, all those things are really important to me in my value system. So seeing that was unfair and unjust. And so that challenged me in a lot of spaces. I'm not alone, right? There's many people out there that feel that same way. And you've probably heard that people usually leave because of other tolerated bad behavior, right? Because the leaders aren't doing something about that. And so sometimes if we investigate and dig down, that bad behavior can come from those other places. Now, the last thing that I'll just talk about that really made sense to me that Duncan shared was, alcohol becoming more of a sacred or special thing when we savor it. When we have a healthy relationship with it, it can be something that we can actually sit down and enjoy rather than something that's a means to an end. Oh, this is just a stress relief for me, or I need to drink because I'm self-sabotaging, or I'm dealing with trauma that I haven't been able to process, or whatever the reasons are behind that, wherever maybe it's an addiction that someone has. But when we can actually get to a point where it becomes our choice rather than a habitual choice, then it becomes so much more fun, right? Because then we can mix it up. It's not about becoming drunk. It's about the experience, the taste, the flavors, the textures, all of those sorts of things, and having more of a healthy relationship with alcohol makes it more of a special or a sacred thing. So I hope you got a bit out of that recap. And definitely, if you haven't already, go back and watch the interview. I feel really honored to have had Duncan Bhaskaran Brown on the podcast. It was great to talk with, great to connect with. And if you would like to speak with him in a little bit more on how he can help you or your business, then go back to that interview and all these details will be in the show notes. So thank you for tuning into this episode, and I look forward to serving you again in our next episode. Thanks for joining in and listening to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. It's been great having you here, and if you'd like to go and like and subscribe and maybe even leave a 5-star rating if you think it's worth it, I'd really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.